9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Discussing everything about the afterlife and spirit world. Coming to you all the way from Ireland. It's Sandie Byrne.
Hey guys, and welcome to another episode of Life After Life with me, Sandie Byrne. And today I have someone from a different part of the world joining me. Well, she's not from a different part of the world, but she's located in a different part of the world. So I would like to welcome Alicia Jean Demetropolis to the Life After Life podcast. Welcome, Alicia.
Thank you so much.
Oh, it's a pleasure to have you here. And she's in Kathmandu at the moment. And but she's not originally from Kathmandu. We'll ask her all of that at the moment, in a moment. But so Alicia, she is the author of a book called Drowning in Now, A Search for God and Humanity at the Top of the World. And she's on a bit of a spiritual journey, but as part of this spiritual journey, she visited Nepal and ended up starting a non-profit organisation to help people over there. Okay, so we will talk about all that in a minute. But Alicia, if it's okay with you, I love to start my podcast by asking guests about their background, what brought them to this part of their lives. Go first.
Okay, I'm just going to jump in. So I was a big business. I was a corporate girl. I was a global corporate girl. That was my world. And my master's degree is in international business and finance, and I worked in the global corporate industry, and that was my identity. Mm-hmm. And after 30 plus years of this, I got a little tired of being thrown under the bus and like being one of the few people around me with a moral compass. I didn't know what I was going to do. At the time, I was a personal trainer and an orthopedic exercise specialist and a medical exercise specialist. So I worked on the side with people who had injuries or were recovering from injuries or who had illness. And one day I packed up the cat, packed up all of my belongings, and I moved from the Chicago area all the way out to Seattle. Thus started the journey through homelessness, and started doing elder care, started meeting elders that I knew I was fulfilling some kind of contract with. This is why I'm here. This is what I'm doing. And behind it all these years, ever since I was little, I had this fascination with Nepal. And I never told anyone. I never said anything. And in 2015, Nepal had this massive earthquake. It was actually 2 earthquakes and lots of aftershocks. At the end of April, they had the first earthquake, and I was out of my mind, frantic, telling my husband, I have to go, I have to go, I have to help, I have to go. The people need me. People are buried alive. I have to go. And it took him a really long time to understand that this wasn't some bizarre phase. This was coming from someplace deep inside of me. And he finally calmed me down and reasoned with me. And he said, well, first of all, you don't know anyone there. You don't know the language. You won't know where to go. And you're probably just going to get in the way. And the second big earthquake hit on May 12th, 2015. Only it doesn't get as much attention because it was deeper in the earth. But it actually measured higher on the Richter scale than the first earthquake, and it did enough damage. So 1 year later, my mother died. And I'm lying in bed, and I talk about this in the book. I'm lying in bed that night, and I realize 1 year ago, May 12th, 2015, the second earthquake hit Kathmandu. And I don't believe in coincidences. And I said, all of a sudden it was there. I just heard this voice. It said, now. Mm-hmm. for whatever reason, it was time to go to Nepal. And in my preparations, a friend of mine happens to know a very good astrologer. And so we talked for an hour and a half. And at the end of the conversation, I said, why is it that I've been told my next spiritual teacher is in Saudi Arabia, but every time I go to Saudi Arabia, I panic, like every fiber of my being just clenches. But I want to go to Kathmandu. I want to go to Nepal. And that's when he walked me through astrocartography, and he said, well, your Mars goes through Saudi Arabia. He said George W. Bush and George H.W. Bush's Mars both go through Kuwait. So they're always going to be fighting that battle until they learn to deal with the underlying spiritual issue. So you can go to Saudi Arabia, but it won't go well. Well, I'm still going to go. Just, Sandie, I'm still going to end up going because I need to face this. I need to deal with whatever is there. But he said, your Saturn goes through Kathmandu. So when you go to Kathmandu, it will feel like you're going home. And I landed. I had no idea why I was here. I had no idea what I was doing here. All I knew was that I was happy for the first time in my, 50 years, 52 years, 51 years. I was happy. And I'd never realized I hadn't been happy. I'd never realized I hadn't been comfortable in my skin. And this country it's dirt poor. It's a third world country. No matter what they do, they're never taken seriously by the rest of the world. There's garbage everywhere, stray dogs everywhere, bulls in the streets. It's my home. I love it. I've been here. Wow. This is my fifth trip. This is my fifth trip, and every time I come here, I start laughing. I come out of the airport, I get in a taxi, head to the hotel, and I'm laughing in the back seat. I'm just giggling like some mad woman because my heart is just finally open and happy that I'm here. So how did I end up here? I needed to finish out some unfinished business, and there's a lot of unfinished business here for me to close out. I'm still working on it. This trip, I feel that a lot has come full circle. A lot is kind of closing out, coming full circle. This is a very interesting journey. I describe it for my husband as a psychedelic trippy trip with the side of existential trauma. Like, I don't know how to describe it otherwise. It's just a very out of body experience, out of body, out of mind experience. But so there it is. That's how I ended up here.
That's amazing. And do you just travel out there once a year or several times a year, or?
I would love to travel several times a year, but you can only get a visa, tourist visa, for 3 months. Oh. And then you apply for another 2 months when you're in the country. Now, some people work the system. So they come out at the end of the year. They spend 3 months. So it would be September, October, November. And at the end of October, they, August, September, October. At the end of October, they file for their 2-month extension. So they stay November, December. New Year rolls over, they start the process over. 3 months tourist visa, and then 2 months. So you can say 10 months in a row.
Okay.
That's just not how my world works right now. So this trip, I'm staying 2 months.
Wow, that's still a long time away from your family, over there.
It is.
Yeah. And
yeah.
I have to ask you, have you ever done past life regression to see if there's anything, with regards to Nepal?
I have. I've done past life regressions before, and Nepal never came up. There was a lot of clearing that needed to be done in Italy and a couple of other countries, but Nepal never came up in the past life regressions. And it might be because I wasn't ready for it yet. I needed to come forward. I need to go through some other things. I need to do a little bit of growth before I dealt with Nepal. That's the best I can think of.
And that's fair enough. And have you ever done a DNA test to see if there's any DNA link?
No, I think I should try that. That would be interesting.
Definitely should try it. Yeah, because I mean,
Yeah,
your name is Greek, so obviously there is a Greek background there somewhere, but you never know where else that, that could come from. I did a DNA test a couple of years back, and apparently I'm only 97.5% Irish. I'm 2.5% Finnish, and I have no idea where that comes from. But anyway, yeah. So they reckon I'm not 100% Irish, but we'll see. I really must come from the Vikings or something somewhere way back in the line.
That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm a bit of a I could call myself, I don't know, a mixed breed, if you like.
You're not a mixed breed. You are like any other human being on this planet. We are a melting pot of our societies, of our communities, of the planet itself. It just reminds us that there really is only one human race.
Yeah, that's true.
There's just one human race, regardless of what your DNA says. You're 97.5% Irish. You're still just a human being because you got some Finnish in there.
Yeah, and I don't know where that comes from, but I've heard a lot of people say that there's a random 2% in, that comes up in their tests too. But I've gone back quite a way on my ancestry, and I don't know where that comes from. But anyway, Sorry, you were going to say something, Alicia.
No. I just cleared my throat.
Okay, so look, there seems to have been some kind of spiritual guidance that brought you to Nepal, and you've done the astrology now. I'd be lying if I said that I know anything about astrology. I don't. Okay, it's just not my forte at all. I allow the people that are good at those things to do those things, and I stick in my lane if they like. But now I know that as a result of your travels to Nepal, that you have started a non-profit organization. So tell us how that came about. What made you start this? What did you see out there?
I ended up at an elder care home the first month I was here. I volunteered through a Nepali NGO, and I made up a name for the NGO for the purposes of the book because I don't want to get sued. I ended up in an elder care home that really wasn't an elder care home, and it had such dark, foreboding, heavy, depressing energy on the grounds, and it just felt awful. And it made me kind of restless, and I kept wanting to go, kept wanting to get out of there, kept wanting to go someplace else. And one night I injured my hip. I didn't actually injure my hip. It turns out really good massage therapist figured out what I did like 6 months after I came back. I just pulled a muscle in my abdomen and hurt my hip. Voila. So I ended up during this, now I have to sit here and I can't go anywhere phase. I ended up realizing that there was, for me, obviously, an older homeless man who used to walk the same route across the street every day. And this is across a very busy street. And he would sit down in pretty much the same doorway every day. And being homeless myself, I never looked homeless. No one knew I was. I was showered every day because I happened to work at a gym, but I was living out of my car. I just saw something in him. And so one day, it's really hot out in September here, and you can't drink water out of the tap, although some desperate locals do. Everybody drinks bottled water, filtered water. And so I packed up a bottle of water and some food and some cookies, and I walked across the street. And I thought my heart was going to jump out of my chest. For whatever reason, I was so utterly terrified at what I was doing. And I walked up and I sat with him and I offered him water. And the first thing he does is hold his hands together and looks up at the heavens and thanks. He says, speaks English. How did you know I needed water? I said, well, it's hot. Everybody needs water. And so we talked. And while we talked, I suddenly understood that homeless people are, even if they're old, they are the dregs of society here. And that is not something Nepal wants tourists to know. What I experienced while I was sitting there talking to him just from these passersby, I thought, are you kidding me? You're going to spit on me? Just so much started to click in my head. And during the course of the conversation, I asked him if he was Hindu, or did I ask him if he was Buddhist? I honestly can't remember. Hinduism is the primary religion here. Then there's Buddhism and Islam. Those are the primary religions here. And he was just horrified that I asked him what his religion was. And he puts his hand over his heart and he says, no, my religion is humanity. My religion is humanity. And I thought, oh my God, for this homeless man to say this, knowing how society treats him, knowing that one young man was going to pretend to punch the guy just to see if he could get a reaction out of me. You know, he stopped our conversation to go down the street and help a woman trying to cross this 8 lanes of traffic that does not stop. She's carrying her baby at a pedestrian crossing. No one stops for anyone at a pedestrian crossing. Nowadays, they have a couple of stoplights, and people are finally obeying them because they wrote enough tickets, and then people can cross the pedestrian crosswalk. But otherwise, if you're in the street, you're fair game. So he breaks off our conversation to go down the street and help a woman holding her baby cross 8 lanes of traffic. Comes back. I watched. She didn't even look at him. She didn't acknowledge him. She didn't want to see him. And she just kept walking. There was no thank you. There was no acknowledgement that another human being helped her cross 8 stinking lanes of traffic. Nothing.
Yeah.
So I went back to my hotel room and I thought, God, this man. You know, I came here and I'd gotten suckered into this, I don't want to call it a fable, this fantasy that Nepal wants everybody else to see. This Shangri-La.
Yeah.
And I realized, oh no, then I started opening my eyes and I started looking around and I saw quite a few homeless elders in the streets. And I thought, oh, okay, that's why I'm here. I'm here to help them, and I'm here to serve them, and I'm here to tell the rest of the world about them. And the rest is history, as they say. And it's been a let's call it a growth opportunity, a huge growth opportunity, spiritually, mentally, physically, emotionally.
Of course.
So that's how the whole thing started. That's how I ended up here.
And so you do run the nonprofit, and do you have people in Nepal that, you know, that work with you, or is it just yourself? I mean, how does it work? Because obviously you can only spend 3 months per year out there. So how do you run? How do you help people out there?
I have my Nepali family, my soul family here in Nepal, and they help when I'm not here. And if I need to pay someone for something, I send them money. I ended up at a second elder care home. I found it. And that is, I ended up in Farping, where the second elder care home is. And that's the elder care home we support here. We also support another elder care home in Guatemala. But I just came back from Farping today, and like you're tearing my heart open that I have to leave Farping to come back to Kathmandu. It's my home. Those are my people. I love those elders. I love that town. But the young man who runs the nonprofit, who runs the elder care home, I send him financial support and we communicate, and he talks about what's going on and fills me in on everything. I do not have a registered business in Nepal. I do not have employees in Nepal. I fly under the radar as much as possible. So that's how it works.
That's fair enough. And I'm going to ask this question, and that's in my mind because I'm sure that other people will think it. Okay. So people are going to say, there's older people in the US who don't get enough care, who are in care homes and they're not being cared for, or, they don't have family to care for them. Okay. So, is it obviously there's a huge need in Nepal. I don't deny that at all. But, would your vision be, that maybe it would go global someday, or, what do you say to people who would? Because I'm sure you've been asked this question in the past.
I have, and I'm a U.S. citizen, and Americans tend to be very nationalistic for a good part of Americans, and there are people who only want to support nonprofits who do work in the United States, and I get that.
Yeah.
I will say that the problem of homeless elders is a global crisis, and I've talked about this before, and I don't need to go into details. It is happening all over the world. If your listeners are curious, they can go to any old search engine and type in granny dumping, and you'll find out what's going on around the world. And those are just the stories that make it to the news. So during the pandemic, I actually needed to stay local in the U.S. And I looked around and I reached out to 3 homeless shelters, and only one responded. Apparently that was the one I was meant to work with, because at 95% of their residents every night were over the age of 55. Many of them were 70, 75. And it gets really cold here.
Yeah.
It can get, not here, I'm sorry, this is Nepal, I'm sorry, back where I live, it can get down to 8, 9 degrees, 10 degrees at night. And that's unusual, but even if it's 27 degrees Fahrenheit, which I think is like 0 degrees Celsius, 27 degrees Fahrenheit, I can't remember. Yeah. And nonetheless, you'll freeze to death if you're out overnight. Mm-hmm. So I found this shelter, and I started providing 2 hot meals for the residents a month. So 2 nights in a row, I'd go and I'd take food and I'd deliver it because we couldn't go in for the pandemic. And then after everything opened up, I would go in and I'd cook, and my friends would join me, and we'd cook and we'd talk to the residents. And it was lovely. I had some lovely experiences there. But in 2023, when we served our final meals for the winter, I thought, okay, how much money have I been spending on 2 hot meals for this shelter an hour away from us? That could have provided almost 2 months of financial support for the elder care home in Farping. Mm-hmm. That was like a third of a month's support for the elder care home in Guatemala. And we have a lot of resources in the United States. Yes, there are homeless elders there. Yes, there are people who need help. I have worked at elder care homes. I've worked at assisted living facilities. Mm-hmm. I'm a med tech. I have to, hang on a second. I've got to cough a little bit.
It's okay.
So, yes, I know they're there. That's not my road. My road is to go around the rest of the world, and that's what I'm honoring. And that's what my board wants to do as well.
And that's fair enough, because I think, if you have a feeling about something, I think it's fair enough that you would follow that feeling. You know, it's very important because, you know, like when you said at the very beginning that you felt all your life drawn to Nepal, like, you know, I thought that was amazing, you know, and I definitely think there must be something there. There's some spiritual energy that draws you back there, you know, because even when I say, like, I lived in Germany and I lived in London, and I didn't feel the strong pull spiritually until I moved back to Ireland, you know, and I think people have certain places that they are connected to, you know.
Right.
So, I mean, fair play to you, and it's not easy. And, you know, one thing that's not easy, and I wanted to talk a little bit about that to you as well, is following your path, you know, thinking, oh, you know, I'm at the wrong side of 50, or I'm at the wrong side of 60 or 40, whatever age it might be, thinking, you know, am I too old to do something, you know? But this is when, you know, your path started, because you were kind of on the treadmill of life, you know, the path that everybody kind of takes, you know, education, career, you know, all of this kind of stuff. And, you know, you were a little bit older than that. You know, you weren't in your 20s or 30s when you started this journey. You know, was it scary? Because I did see that you battled depression and stress at one point, you know, which a lot of people have a tendency to do at a certain point in their lives. So, like, you know, how did you build yourself back up to do this, you know, to say I can make a difference?
So I've been working on the nonprofit part-time, because for me, I wasn't making a salary for the first number of years. And for me, I was thinking, I have to work. I have to work almost full-time. The nonprofit itself is almost a full-time job. I was burning the candles at both ends, as we say. And at some point, I'm going to lose wax and burn out. And it was my sister who told me a couple of years ago, you know, if you don't stop relying on outside income, this nonprofit won't be around in another 2 years. If you don't start having to rely on the nonprofit, I thought, I can't do that. I can't do that. This isn't going to work. We don't make enough money. Well, that's before I understood that I always had enough money, that the universe always provides. And I hadn't started manifesting for myself. I hadn't started drawing the energy to me. So I took the plunge. I quit my job, which was not a popular decision because we are in crisis mode in the assisted living facilities and the dementia care wards in the U.S. But I did quit. And I went off to help a very good friend of mine, finished a soul contract there with her to help her with her mother for about a year. And it was just wonderful. It was beautiful. It was the best year to help her. And I found myself having more than enough time and more than enough money to run the nonprofit. Fast forward to today. You're asking me, I'm going to go back to your question, which was, how did I just plow on through, paraphrasing? I'm going to tell you, I'm just stupid. I'm just being honest here. Okay, people, if any of your listeners are looking for incredible inspiration and words of wisdom, I was just following my gut. I felt that I couldn't stop. And when I was so overwhelmed and I kept thinking something's got to give, the nonprofit was not on that list. Part of me thought, what else are you going to do? You know, you're in your 50s. I'm 58 now. What else are you going to do? Well, the answer is write a book, make money off the book. There are other things I can do. And I can grow the nonprofit so I can eventually earn a salary, which is where we're at. But I would just call myself stupid and stubborn. I just couldn't quit. And it was my gut and my brain and my soul and my heart telling me don't quit. And I didn't.
And here you are.
I kept thinking, oh, there's light at the end of the tunnel. Oh, dear God, let it not be a train coming at me. But I kept thinking there was light at the end of the tunnel. So that's really it. I mean, that's really my secret to success is I'm just a stubborn middle-aged schmuck, as we say. I couldn't give it up.
No, and that's fair enough. And, and like, I think it's important to stress that point because so many of us ignore our calling,
Right.
I mean, your calling might be, to have a career, it might be to raise a family, whatever it is, but don't ignore it. So many people put these things off and they think, I'll do it in 5 years, I'll do it in 10 years. Do it if you can. If you're in a position to follow your gut, there's nothing like it. I quit a full-time job when my kids were younger, to do this spiritual work. And, I agree with you that the universe always provides. We're not independently wealthy that I could do without a second salary, but the universe always provides. I want to go back to something you mentioned earlier, granny dumping, something I'm not familiar with. Could you give us just a very quick explanation?
Yeah, I get a little emotional over this.
That's fine.
So the reason I actually have a nonprofit, the reason I actually have a business is because the global population is getting older. Mm-hmm. And we as a global society are not able to keep up with it. We're not able to keep up with the care, and people are living longer. Mm-hmm. And families are getting desperate. For lack of a better word, families are getting desperate. Here in Nepal, we've had people whose own children turned them out of the house. They said, we can't afford to feed you anymore. We can't afford to take care of you anymore. And this one resident ended up in the streets. Wow. And hand to God, he said, when he found his way to the elder care home, I thought I would walk until I drop, and there I would die. Sandie, this was his own, I don't want to swear here, his own stinking home that his kids turned him out of. In Guatemala, the trend is you take your loved one to the hospital because they've become so sick, no one can take care of them, and you've been neglecting them. So you take them to the hospital and then just walk away. And then the hospital has to find some place for them. This is going on all over the world. So if you do Google granny dumping, you're going to find the most recent example is of a family in Mexico that got so desperate they put their mother in a big cardboard box with a blanket by the side of a remote road and left her.
Oh, God.
There's a story of a man in the United States who had a friend in the UK, and this man in the United States was so desperate because he couldn't get care for his father. Here we go again. Huge need. No way to fulfill the need. Demand, supply, not matching. Mm-hmm. So he and his friend in the UK made an agreement, and he shipped his father off to the UK, put him on a plane. His friend picked him up, drove him around for a while, dropped him off at a bus station, waited for a little while, went back to the bus station, and pretended he just found this man. Knew nothing about him. And they were hoping that he would get lost in the national health system and no one would notice. Because if the man had such severe dementia, he couldn't tell you his name or where he was from. Okay. These stories are happening around the world, and only a few of them make it to the news. We see it every day in Guatemala. I see it every day in Nepal. I have had arguments with I had an argument with a high-ranking person at the Nepal Tourist Board and his best friend, who is a police sergeant, and they kept insisting that they didn't have homeless elders in the streets. No, we don't. I said, yes, you do. No, we don't. I've seen them. No, you haven't. I'm like, oh my God. oh my God, this is not happening. And then I quickly shut my mouth because my intuition is going, Leash, shut up. Leash, shut up. Don't say anything. I didn't want to ruffle any feathers. So, yeah, that's what granny dumping is. Yeah.
And you'd wonder about the humanity of the world, really, because, now they're talking about bringing in assisted suicide across the world for people who are, just ill or just, of a certain age, or if you have depression, certain things that, aren't really death worthy, but they want to end life anyway. And, I worry about the humanity of the world. I really do. I worry about it sometimes.
So as part of my job as nurse's aide and med tech and nurse delegate, I have to know about the law in Washington State. And I can tell you the laws in the United States are very strict. Mm-hmm. So if you have depression, you do not get approved for assisted suicide. It's a very long process. If you have a fast growing cancer or disease and you are quickly deteriorating, you may not make it through the whole process to be able to claim your own dignity over your death. You've got to go to one appointment, then they have to wait, and then you go back to the doctor, and then if he approves you, you go to another appointment for a second opinion, and if he approves you, then you have to wait for him to write the prescription, and if you get the prescription, you have to wait before you can pick it up, and not every pharmacy is going to fill it. They quiz you, they make sure they scour your medical records. Mm-hmm. And I have known of several people who chose it because they said, I'm not doing that. I'm not going out. I'm going out on my own terms. And the way our laws are written, it's very, very hard to get approval for assisted suicide. And that's their thing. They were in their right mind when they made this decision. They understood what they were doing. If you can't mix the solution yourself and drink it yourself, it's too late. So if you have ALS or you have MS or you have a brain tumor or you have something where you may lose the use of your hands, you'll be fine one day and then the next morning, and I have friends who had this happen in their family. The next morning, their loved one said, I'm afraid I'm losing my hands. I got to go. Mm-hmm. And 15 minutes later, they're gone. Oh, so now, really, Sandie, it doesn't strike me as my journey. No. It doesn't strike me as something I would choose. My soul is more of I'm going to ride it out. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Finish my life. Finish my journey.
Yeah, and, like, we can talk about extreme cases, but in the Netherlands, there's a 28-year-old lady who will die next month because of her depression, and she has been approved.
Oh, no. I don't agree with that.
I don't. I have to say either at 28 years old, someone like I've suffered with PTSD for like several years, and, there would be times where you think, God, this is too hard. But then there's times where life is really good, so yeah, I'm not sure 28 years old. Anyway, one other question, because I know that, you have a background in healthcare and you work with, older people and that. You have, written on your profile that, about people feeling guilty about not being with their loved one when they passed.
Oh.
And how do you deal with that?
I've heard that.
Sorry to talk across you, but
it's okay.
I'm sure you must get some of that, when you meet families in Nepal, because they've dumped their loved ones and then they're all of a sudden gone. So there must be a lot of guilt.
No.
Oh, God.
No. I hate to break it to you.
I'm looking for humanity where obviously there is none. Yeah.
Well, there is. Things are changing. And I'll get into that in a moment. But the most important thing is I learned a long time ago that even if your loved one is unconscious, and even if you think, oh, they can't hear me, they can still hear you. B, they choose when they want to go. Now, obviously, that's not the case for everyone. Obviously, we have unplanned deaths.
Yeah.
I'm talking about someone who is dying of old age or is dying of illness or sickness, and they get to the point where they're no longer responding. So there's a story. Very first experience I had with this was when my father was dying. And a hospice nurse told me, you know, he's going to go when he wants to go. I said, I understand. I've kind of figured that. My gut told me that. That's why I'm not in the room all the time. But I was trying to figure out why he was hanging around. I mean, he'd been in a coma 24 hours. 24 hours. I'm like, nope, 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 you're not hanging around. I am going to figure out why you're hanging around. I'm going to figure out what's wrong. And I worked on him for a couple of hours. I went through everything. I was relentless. His childhood, my sister's, his marriage, his military, his parents, his stepmother. I went through everything. And finally, I'm sitting there on my laptop in the room, and I was working on, again, I was in the corporate world, so I was an Excel genius, and I had this big financial model that I put together for my sisters and I, and you could plug in any number, and it would calculate how long mom's money would last based on whatever interest rate or however much we got for the house, all of that. So you could just play with numbers and say, okay, this is how long mom's money is going to last. And I'm just sitting there. And I've been quiet for a long time. And I said, you know, Dad, if you're worried about money, don't be. Because I'm looking at the Excel spreadsheet, and I'm telling you right now, this is how much we left her in really good shape. You really did a good job financially. You have got her set because she was older than him. And we had the feeling this was going to be a long road with her with Alzheimer's, and it was. And I said, this is how much you left her. This is how, you know, she can afford to take a cruise every year. This is how we're going to do it. And he was gone in 15, 20 minutes. That was it.
Amazing.
That was what he was looking for. That's what he was looking for. And so this hospice nurse had told me the story of a woman who was just lingering. And her family, whole family, daughters, sons, nephews, husband, everybody, they were all determined that she wasn't going to die alone. She told them, and other nurses told them, you know what, you can't do this. She's going to go when she wants to go, and that might be when she's alone. And they were dumbfounded, and they were stubborn, and they said, no, our mother isn't going to die alone. We won't do that to her. And they set up, Sandie, 24-hour shifts. And there was one person or two person in that room 24 hours a day. This went on for a week. And at the end of the week, the new shift came in, and someone made the suggestion, let's go get something to eat, because all four of them walk out of the room. They tell the nurse at the nurse's station, we're going to go grab something to eat at the caf, and we'll be right back. We'll be back in about a half an hour. And this hospice nurse looked at me, and she said, we all looked at our watch, and 10 minutes later we walked in, and she was gone.
Oh, bless her.
So, and I've had friends of mine who have said, I've always regretted it. My father died after I left the hospital. I didn't wait long enough. I said, no. You gave your father a gift.
Yeah.
He didn't want to go in front of you. You gave him the gift of leaving on his own terms. You let him go on his way by himself.
Yeah.
Don't feel guilty. And so I one thing I want anyone listening to know is, do not think your loved one can't hear you, because they can. They absolutely can. I have been doing this 20 years. I know they can still hear you. Tell them what you think they need to hear. Tell them what you need to tell them. Don't hold anything back. Don't feel guilty. And then give them time alone. Leave the house. Tell them, I'm going to be gone for 20 minutes. I'm going to be outside working. And leave. Give them time alone. Give them time to honor what they want. You should honor what they want, is what I'm trying to say. But just don't feel guilty if they're alone when they die. That's what they wanted.
I'd have to agree, because we had my husband's granddad passed away. It's almost 17 years ago now, because
Wow.
I know, because I'm with my husband since I was 18 years old, so he was kind of like a granddad to me, and I was expecting our second son, who was born 5 weeks after his passing. So we called him after him. But anyway, long story short, he was in hospital, and we knew he wasn't going to come home. And his wife and his daughter were with him 24/7 for those few days, and blah blah. So one day, anyway, his daughter said, "I'm just going to the toilet. I'll be back in 5 minutes." So when she left the room, her mother, my husband's grandmother, said to her husband, she said, "Charlie, I know you don't want to leave while she's here." And she said, "I know you're worried about me, but I will be fine." She said, "She's gone to the bathroom. If you want to go, now is a good time to go." He left within a minute. Within the minute, he was gone. Yeah.
Oh, Sandy,
Yeah.
that's so beautiful.
Yeah. He was just
Good
ready to go,
on-
but he didn't
Yeah.
want to go in front of his daughter. He didn't want her there beside him. So,
Right.
look.
And good on your grandmother, your husband's grandmother, for acknowledging that. Good on her. Yeah.
Yeah, bless her. Anyway, sorry. So, look,
No,
I
okay.
feel like I'm keeping you far too long chatting. But
It's
tell
okay.
us about your book. Where did the idea of the book come from? Who should read the book? What can people get from it?
It's not religious. I'm going to start by saying, if people are not God people, if you look at the title and you say, I'm not a God person, I'm not going to like this book. It's not a God book. I've had Christians read it who liked it. Even they weren't offended that I quote the Quran and I quote all these other religions. And I've had people who are like non-religious, non-spiritual. They say, I'm not really a spiritual person. They read it and they're like, that wasn't too bad. That was really interesting. So, really quickly, before I left, a very good friend of mine, Dr. Ronnie J. Sanlo, Sanlo, she's brilliant, one of the bravest women I know. She looked at me and she said, "You're going to keep a journal while you're there, right?" And I said, "Well, probably." She goes, "Let's publish your journal when you come home." And I just laughed.
Yeah.
And she did. She was straight-faced. And I said, "Oh, you're serious? You think I have something interesting to say?" And she just straight-faced looked at me and said, "I believe in the message that's going to come out of this trip." So I came home, and for 8 months, all I did was just download everything into the computer. Microsoft Word, 500 pages, single space, Microsoft Word. It was like 580,000 words. And I was downloading the journal, all the emails I sent home, all the photos I took, every description I could come up with, just matching everything to it. And when it was all done, I went, okay, now what? Everything I wrote, I'm a writer. I'm in love with my experience, and I'm in love with everything I wrote. I'm like, this is like, I don't know what to do with this. And Ronnie convinced me that the story would reveal itself to me. She's like, just give it time. The book will tell you what it's supposed to be about. And now looking back, Sandy, it's such a no-brainer. Because there's so much that happened, and there's so many moving pieces. And I'd been playing around with titles, including, you'll love this, the title, Monks on Motorbikes, Tales from the Top of the World. Because I'm such a child, to this day, I find the idea of a monk riding a motorcycle hilarious. I'm just a child. But one day the title came to me, and I heard it in my head. And I said, oh, right, because I remember that experience of being there and feeling like there's too much now. I was in that first elder care home, and I was just being overwhelmed. It was like an autistic experience. There's too much stimulus, and I felt like I was drowning. And that's when I thought, oh, right. Okay, right. And from then on, all the brutal editing started. And chapters were pulled out and entire sections of the book were pulled out. And I just focused on this problem of how we treat each other as humans and how we treat our oldest, most vulnerable population. And I'm not disrespecting anybody who works with children, anybody who does women's empowerment, anybody who works with child sex trafficking. God love you. Go for it. Do it. You are badly needed. But everybody forgets about the old people. Really.
Yeah.
Nobody remembers that they are dependent on other people. Their future is behind them. And it just started to click and it started to form. And then there was this, it was a flow. And it came together.
I love it. I love it. So, aside from the good work that you're doing, if I was somebody who needed inspiration to follow my gut, would this book help me?
I think watching any woman go through a spiritual growth is good for other women. I'm not going to say that my story is going to inspire you. I would think that maybe you would look at this and say, wow, that's really interesting. And your heart opens a little bit. And when our heart opens, we become able to receive, and receiving everything, including what our calling is, what our purpose is. So everybody knows the Julia Roberts movie, Eat, Love, Pray. What is it? Eat, Pray, Love. I don't even remember the name.
Yeah.
And then there's another woman, these are American movies, and then there's another movie, Under the Tuscan Sun, and they're both based on books, but they're both about women going out and having a spiritual journey to find out what life is all about. I think any woman needs to see these types of movies and read these types of books and just let their heart open so that they can hear their own calling and find their own way. But I don't want to be responsible for inspiring someone else to do something, because then if they think it's not working out, they're going to point to me. I just want you to open your heart. I just want you to open your heart.
I don't think they will. And you don't have to fly halfway around the world. You can find your spiritual journey. You can find your purpose where you are. It's just opening up to yourself, as Alicia just said.
Yeah.
It's opening up.
And you're right there.
With yourself.
Yeah. You're right there in Ireland.
Yeah.
And that's where you're meant to be.
Yeah. 100%. So thank you, Alicia, for sharing your journey with us. I will post in the show notes attached to this podcast links to your website and to your book as well, for those people who might be interested in reading it. Okay?
Yeah. And I'm going to ask people really quickly, I'm sorry. So you can order it off of Amazon.com, or I'm going to ask people, please support your local bookstore. Please go to Amazon, look up the paperback, look up the paperback ISBN number, copy that ISBN number down. Please go to your local bookstore and ask them to order it. I don't make as much. The nonprofit doesn't make as much. I don't care. I want everyone to start supporting their local bookstore. Please order it from them and not Amazon. That's all I ask. They can do it. It's available. It's available at any bookstore.
The ISBN of the book in the show notes, so you can take it to your local bookstore and order it from there. That's a great point, because I do order a lot of Amazon, so I should support local ones more. Alicia, thank you so much for sharing your journey with us, and best of luck, because it's not over yet. You're still in the middle of it and still discovering yourself every single day. But I think we've made an important point here today about following your soul's path, because you will be drawn in that direction, and too many of us ignore it.
Oh, please do follow your gut, no matter how scary it is. Just trust in the process.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Okay, guys, so thank you for listening, and I will see you in the next episode of Life After Life. So until then, take care and stay safe.
Discussing everything